Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today I have another episode for you guys of Harry Potter HEIR SLYTHERIN Part 2 Book 2. Chapter 4. As the first Quidditch match of the year approached, tensions between Gryffindor and Slytherin began to escalate. Slytherins were already frequent targets of pranks by the Weasley twins, and those pranks grew more and more frequent. Ron Weasley and Draco sniped at each other during class and in the hallways. The two could hardly go to class without some sort of snarky exchange. Harry found himself coming to his best friend's defense more often than he would have liked. Harry, Draco and the rest of the Slytherin team were on their way to the pitch for a special practice when they came across the Gryffindor team, already on the pitch and playing. Oliver Wood, Gryffindor's captain and keeper, landed his broom and addressed the Slytherin team. "Oh, Flint, this is our practice time. I booked the field for today. Plenty of pitch for all of us, Wood." Flint held out a piece of paper. "Professor Snape specifically authorized our practice time." As Wood read the note, the rest of the Gryffindor team began to land around him. Fred and George Weasley were the first to land, followed shortly by their younger brother Ron. Wood finished reading. "Permission to practice to train a new chaser and seeker? Potter and Malfoy, I assume." "That's right," said Flint. "And perhaps you've noticed Mr. Malfoy's generous gift to the Slytherin team." Flint held out his Nimbus 2001. "They're new this year," said Draco. Any Quidditch player would know the year's new brooms, but Draco enjoyed rubbing it in. By this time, a few Gryffindor spectators had come down from the stands, Hermione Granger among them. She ran up to Ron. "What's going on?" Granger asked. "Everybody is admiring the new brooms that my father bought for Slytherin," said Malfoy. "Gryffindor is outclassed, but that's nothing new." Ron's face grew dark red. Fred and George looked at their brooms, old clean sweep fives, clearly embarrassed. Granger rolled her eyes. At least nobody on Gryffindor needed their daddy to buy them a spot on the team. "Just weren't talented enough to make Seeker on your own, were you, Malfoy?" Draco scowled. "Nobody asked your opinion, you filthy little mudblood." "You'll pay for that, Malfoy." Ron reached into his robes for his wand. Before Ron could cast a spell, Harry had his wand in his hand. Levi Corpus. Harry had learned the spell from Mr. Malfoy, and it worked perfectly. Ron was jerked into the air by his heel. On the way up, he dropped his wand. Fred and George Weasley pulled their wands and aimed them at Harry, but found Harry with his hands in the air, palms out. "I'm going to put your brother down," said Harry. "Nobody got hurt. I'm sure we'd all rather be practicing than sitting in the hospital wing." Harry lowered Ron to the ground, and Ron scrambled to grab his wand. "It's still our pitch," said Wood. "No," said Harry, "it's Slytherin's pitch. Maybe you should read Professor Snape's note again, it doesn't say anything about sharing." Wood's eyes darted to the note, and growing wide with shock as he reread Professor Snape's spiky handwriting. "So," said Harry, "where's your note from McGonagall, giving you the pitch?" Wood said nothing. His hands clenched with fury, crumbling Professor Snape's note into a small ball. "Don't have one?" asked Harry. Wood's voice was quiet. "Plenty of pitch for all of us, right, Flint?" "Plenty," said Flint. "We'll take the East End." "West is fine with us," said Wood, turning away. "Come on, Gryffindor!" Exclamation point. Exclamation point. Exclamation point. Exclamation point. Asterisk. Harry was sitting with Pansy at the Halloween feast. Tracy Davis was sitting across the table. Pansy, eating silently. Draco had earned himself a detention in herbology, and was currently helping Professor Sprout repot mandrakes. He would be lucky to make it to the feast at all. Harry had been waiting all week to get away from Draco. He wanted to ask about what Draco had said to Granger on the Quidditch pitch. "Pansy, can I ask you about something? A wizard thing?" Pansy smiled. "Of course, Harry." Earlier this week, Ron Weasley got really upset with Draco. Draco was calling Granger names, and I think he called her something really nasty. Pansy waved her hand in the air, dismissively. "Draco insulted Granger, and Weasley got mad. Nothing new about that." "Weasley was angrier than I'd ever seen him," Harry said. "Draco called Granger a mudsomething." Pansy sucked in air through her teeth. "Yes, that would do it." "What's it mean?" "Really, Harry? I know you were raised by muggles, but you weren't raised by wolves." Harry shrugged, and Pansy sighed. "There are 3 types of wizards, pure bloods, half-bloods, and mudbloods," Pansy said, ticking them off on her fingers. In Slytherin, we're almost all pure bloods, which means we have 2 magic parents who also had magical parents. So if you have 4 magical grandparents, then you're a pure blood. Yes. Wizardry is hereditary, so when you have 2 magical parents who also had 2 magical parents, you're more likely to be a strong wizard. Draco and I are pure bloods, for example, and we can trace our blood purity backwards for several generations. Pansy ticked off her second finger. A half-blood is a catch-all term for a wizard who isn't a pure blood, but still has at least 1 magical parent. You'll see the occasional half-blood in Slytherin, for example, but mostly they get sent to other houses. Wait. Harry held up his hands. I'm a half-blood because my mother was Muggle-born. Correct. Why? Pansy looked uncomfortable. It's just the way the terms work, Harry. Okay. So my children will be pure bloods if... Harry, you will marry a pure-blooded witch, just like any proper Slytherin wizard. Your children will have all magical grandparents, so they will be pure bloods. Pansy moved on to her third finger. Finally, a mudblood has no magical parents. You will see that in Hufflepuff. Mudblood magic comes from a grandparent or great-grandparent, so they aren't as good at magic. Got it? I think so. Thanks, Pansy. Pansy's explanation seemed logical, but Harry couldn't figure out where Hermione Granger fit in. Neither of her parents was magical, but she was best in their year. According to Pansy's explanation, that shouldn't be possible. After the feast, as Harry was walking back to Slytherin, he found himself walking next to Tracy Davis. As always, her voice was quiet but intense. Harry, what you and Pansy were talking about at the feast? You mean about pure bloods and... Davis cut him off. Yes, that. You should know, the polite term for somebody with 2 non-magical parents is Muggle-born. What Draco called Granger is a slur, one of the worst in the wizarding world. Harry's eyes widened. Draco was saying that Granger has dirty blood, that she's worthy of contempt, and that if she has a child she'll befoul wizarding blood, generally. It's the worst thing you can call a Muggle-born wizard. Why would Draco? Harry knew that Draco didn't get along with Gryffindors, but this was worse than he had come to expect from his friend. Blood purity is very important in some circles. Circles that the Malfoys and the Parkinsons are involved in. Those types of wizards think that if you aren't a pure blood, you aren't anything. Did you notice how uncomfortable Pansy got when you asked why you were considered a half-blood? Harry nodded. It's because blood purists believe that a Muggle-born wizard is as bad as a Muggle. Why is being a Muggle bad? Harry asked. I was a Muggle for almost 11 years. I'm not saying it makes sense. I'm just saying that's what they believe. Tracy frowned. Anyway, here's the point, blood purists use that word rather casually. But it's not something you should go around saying carelessly, unless you mean it, I guess. Tracy looked Harry straight in the eye. Thanks, Tracy, said Harry. I'll make sure to avoid it. Tracy suddenly looked away. Okay. Bye, then. She was gone in a swirl of blonde hair, losing herself in the nearby crowd. Harry looked behind him, trying to find Tracy, and saw that he was being followed by a group of Gryffindor second years. Ron Weasley was moving his hand through the air as if it were a broom, waving his arms wildly as he told a story, apparently about Quidditch. Granger rolled her eyes but smiled indulgently. Harry made a note to apologize to Granger later. Away from Draco. And Ron? As Harry and the crowd of students moved onto the second floor, Harry began to hear an odd whispering noise. Blood, 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 blood. Harry stopped walking and shook his head. His sudden stop caused a pair of Hufflepuffs bumped into him. Sorry. Don't worry, Harry said. He stepped aside and listened, but the whispering was gone. Perhaps he had imagined things. Then again, perhaps not. As Harry and the crowd rounded a corner, he found himself ankle-deep in a puddle of water. More importantly, there was an enormous message scrawled on the wall, written in what appeared to be blood. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the HEIR beware. The crowd went absolutely silent. One familiar voice spoke out, Enemies of the HEIR, beware. You'll be next, mudbloods. Harry looked down. Beneath the message, standing alone and opposite the crowd, was Draco Malfoy. Exclamation point. Exclamation point. Exclamation point. Exclamation point. Asterisk. The next several minutes were a whirlwind. Only later in the evening was Harry able to make sense of everything that happened. First, Argus Filch arrived. His cat, Mrs. Norris, was hanging beneath the message, upside down, by its tail. Filch began wailing and accused Draco of killing his cat. Although Draco didn't seem the sort, Harry had to admit that the evidence was rather damning. The entirety of the Halloween feast had stumbled across Draco standing alone at the scene of the crime. The hall was absolute chaos. Students were shouting and pushing around, half trying to get closer to the petrified body of Mrs. Norris, the other half trying to get as far away as possible. Harry caught a glimpse of Draco being whisked away by Snape and Dumbledore. There was a high-pitched scream. Ron Weasley's sister had finally seen Mrs. Norris. Silence. Professor McGonagall's magically amplified voice boomed out over the crowd. McGonagall was not shouting, but her tone made it clear that disobedience would not be tolerated. The students immediately became quiet and stopped moving. Harry looked around and located McGonagall at the edge of the crowd, arms in the air. Slytherins, please congregate in the north and off hall, Gryffindors in the south, Hufflepuffs in the east and Ravenclaws in the west. Prefects, you will conduct your housemates back to your dormitories. At that time, you will take attendance and report any missing classmates to your head of house. Harry moved to the north end of the hall. Harry managed to find Pansy in the crowd, and they walked back to Slytherin together. The entire house was unusually quiet. There was a tension in the air, an energy of some sort that Harry couldn't quite put his finger on. Back in the common room, Pusey, who was a fifth-year prefect, was taking attendance. He read the names in a bored sort of voice. He clearly thought that the exercise was a waste of time, but was also unwilling to flout the instructions of the deputy headmistress. As he moved through the list, Pusey called out without thinking, "Malfoy." There was a long silence. Finally, Harry spoke up. "He's with Snape and Dumbledore." "Right." Pusey paused for a moment, then continued. "Montague? You here?" The rest of attendance went by without incident. Harry and Pansy agreed to wait in the common room for Draco to return. They did not have to wait long. Draco returned before curfew, escorted into the room by a stone-faced Severus Snape. As soon as the door closed behind their head of house, Draco's face broke into a wide smile. As the blonde boy sauntered toward Harry and Pansy, whispers rippled across the room. Draco dropped into a chair next to Harry. He slouched down and draped his leg over the arm of the chair, languidly turning his foot in the air. Harry leaned forward in his chair. "Well? What happened?" "When?" Draco began inspecting his fingernails. "What was the writing on the wall? Who's the heir? Was that blood? What's a chamber of secrets?" "Oh, that. That was nothing." Pansy reached out and swatted Draco on the back of the head. "Don't be a brat. Harry saw you get taken away by Snape and Dumbledore. Tell us what happened." "Nothing," said Draco. "I'm still here, aren't I?" "So it was you?" Harry asked. Draco smiled and stretched. "Filch tried to have me expelled, but Snape was having none of it, not from that repugnant squib." "So what did the message mean?" said Pansy. Draco became serious. He sat up and made a production of glancing around the room to check for eavesdroppers. He couldn't have been more conspicuous if he tried, which was, in fact, his goal. Several upper-year students had stopped their homework and were clearly listening to Draco. "Father told me about it this summer. The Chamber of Secrets can only be opened by the heir of Slytherin," Draco said. "And now, the chamber is open." "You opened it," said Harry. "Are you the heir of Slytherin?" Draco stood and smiled. "I think I'm headed to bed. Tiring night, you know." As soon as Draco was out of sight, the whispers began again in the common room. Chapter 5. The Chamber of Secrets and the mysterious heir had become the talk of the school, despite the impending Gryffindor-Slytherin Quidditch match. Harry was dying to learn more about the chamber, but Draco wasn't saying anything. His friend kept saying vague, non-committal things whenever Harry asked about the chamber. Harry tried the library, but he couldn't get his hands on a copy of Hogwarts, a history. All 20 were checked out. Harry's unlikely savior came in the form of Hermione Granger, who asked about the Chamber of Secrets and history of magic. Professor Binns gave a detailed account of the legend to class of Slytherin and Gryffindor students. Binns confirmed what Draco had said, that only the heir of Slytherin could open the chamber, and that it was supposedly hidden somewhere in Hogwarts. Almost as interesting was Binns' revelation about the blood prejudices underlying Slytherin's theory of education at Hogwarts. The last class of the week for Harry and Draco was potions. Professor Snape's lesson was just as difficult as always, but his supervision of Harry and Draco was much more lax. Snape spent most of his time on the opposite side of the room, allowing Harry and Draco to conspire with Pansy and Theodore Nott. Working together, the four Slytherins finished easily, and quite early. Just before class ended, Snape finally approached Harry's table. Mr. Malfoy, Mr. Potter, Ms. Parkinson, please stay after class. Harry glanced at Draco. Harry had assumed that Snape was allowing them to work together, giving them an easy day just before their match. If he was wrong, there would be hell to pay. But if that was the problem, Snape would have kept Not behind, as well. When the classroom had cleared, Harry, Draco and Pansy stood before Snape's desk. Do you know, Mr. Malfoy, why I asked the three of you to stay behind? No, sir. Let me rephrase, then. Why have I begun to hear rumors that you are claiming to be the heir of Slytherin? I've never said that. Draco looked away from Snape as he spoke. Indeed. You have simply allowed students to draw their own conclusions, while you remain silent. Snape's voice grew hard. I thought, Mr. Malfoy, that you understood the gravity of the situation, following our conversation with the headmaster on Halloween. Mr. Filch's request for your expulsion was not well taken, at the time, but circumstances can easily change. Snape stared at Draco, allowing the gloom of the word expulsion to hang in the room. Apparently, my wishes were not clear on Halloween, so I will be perfectly clear today. You will not perpetuate the notion that you are the heir of Slytherin. You will not allow this rumor to be spread. If this rumor is mentioned in your presence, or if you are asked directly, you will deny that you are the heir. Do you understand? Draco nodded, but Snape was not satisfied. Perhaps a public declaration is in order, Mr. Malfoy? An apology? I find that shame has a remarkable deterrent effect. No, sir. You don't need to do that, sir. Draco's face had gone white. Good. Snape looked at Harry and Pansy, in turn. Mr. Potter, Ms. Parkinson, I will rely upon you to prevent Mr. Malfoy from bringing about his own expulsion. Snape stood. And, in case either of you have considered propagating this falsehood on behalf of Mr. Malfoy, I will have you expelled if you do so. Snape glared at the three students. Neither Harry nor Draco nor Pansy moved a muscle. The three of you are dismissed. Harry, Draco and Pansy were silent for most of the walk back to the dungeons. Finally, Harry couldn't resist speaking up. So, I'm not the heir of Slytherin, okay? Draco blurted. Stop badgering me about it. Sure, but Filch wanted me expelled, but Dumbledore said I was innocent until proven guilty. Snape said that the dark magic involved in permanently petrifying the cat was too advanced for me, and then he took me back to the common room. So you didn't do it? Of course I didn't, Draco snapped. I'm not expelled, am I? Draco walked directly through the common room and up to the dormitory. He did not come downstairs for dinner. Flint was furious. I will personally slaughter Malfoy if we lose the match because he couldn't eat, Flint declared at dinner. Harry, whose stomach was churning with nervousness about the match, began to shovel food into his mouth. If he was lucky, he'd be able to keep from vomiting. But even the possibility of puking was better than Flint's wrath. Exclamation point. 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 Asterisk. The day of the Gryffindor-Slytherin Quidditch match dawned cold and clear. Harry got dressed early, planning to head down to the pitch alone to master his nerves in solitude. As he entered the common room, however, he found Pansy sitting next to the door. Do you mind if I walk down to the pitch with you? Pansy asked. I want to get a good seat to watch your first game. Without waiting for a reply, Pansy hopped to her feet and started for the Quidditch pitch. Harry was quiet for most of the walk. It was Pansy who broke the silence. Who do you think it is? Pansy asked Harry. Harry was lost in thought. Who's who? The heir of Slytherin. Everybody's still saying that it's Draco, or you. Don't let Snape catch you saying that, Harry said. Then, the full import of what Pansy said finally registered. Wait, people are saying I'm the heir? Pansy, I was with you at dinner. You know it wasn't me. Pansy shrugged. You went to the bathroom halfway through the feast. You could have done it then? You see, the way I figure, the heir to Slytherin would clearly have power, prestige, cunning, and above all, good looks. She smiled at Harry. It sounds like somebody I know, but I just can't remember who. Harry was suddenly uncomfortable, for many reasons. It's not me, he said. I certainly didn't write anything on the walls. I'd remember if I did. Pansy giggled and gave him a hug. Harry stumbled over his own feet, but Pansy released him before he crashed to the ground. Good luck, Harry. Pansy dashed into the stands. When Harry entered the locker room, he found that he was not alone. Flint was sitting on a bench, already in uniform, carefully wrapping his fingers in Spello tape. The Slytherin captain's face was intense, and he made no move to greet Harry. Harry had no desire to break the silence, either. Harry walked to his locker and opened it without saying a word. Harry pulled out his uniform. It was green with silver trim. On the left breast was the Slytherin crest, a silver snake against a green background. Harry ran his fingers along the edges of the crest. Today, he would be representing Slytherin. The entire house would be watching him. Any mistake he made, and failing, would be on display for everybody to see. Harry's stomach lurched. He put a hand against the locker and leaned forward, breathing heavily. Nervous, Potter. Flint had finally spoken. Yeah. Harry was taking slow breaths. The urge to vomit was almost overwhelming. Do you want some advice? Sure. In my first match, I scored on my own keeper, Flint said. Don't do that. Harry turned and looked at his captain, to see if he was joking. Flint's face was dead serious. Thanks for the pep talk, Flint. Oh, you wanted a pep talk? I'm sorry, little girl. I'll do better next time. Flint tugged on his gloves. Finish changing and meet me on the pitch. When Harry finally walked out of the locker rooms, Flint was already in the air with a practice quaffle. Flint jerked his head upwards, indicating that Harry should fly up to meet him. As Harry rose through the air, Flint threw him the quaffle. As soon as the quaffle was in the air, Flint darted at the nearest goal ring. Harry threw the quaffle back to Flint, who fired it through the nearest ring. It was a pattern from practice, a drill the Slytherin team used to warm up. Harry retrieved the quaffle, threw it to Flint, and then flew toward the rings. Harry easily caught Flint's pass and tossed the quaffle through a ring. Harry and Flint repeated the drill, over and over. Harry could feel his apprehension fade as he completed the steps of the familiar drill. Flint began to throw the quaffle farther and farther ahead of Harry, forcing Harry to increase his speed. Harry did the same for Flint, forcing his captain to catch at different angles. Finally, one of Flint's throws was too far for Harry to catch easily. Harry stretched out and snagged the quaffle with his left hand, but he was moving too fast. He'd be past the rings before he could shoot. Harry braked his broom with his right foot, throwing the broom into a flat spin. His back was to the rings, but he only had one chance to shoot before he was past. Harry hurled the quaffle over his shoulder, without looking, just guessing at where the rings would be. As Harry continued through his spin, the rings once again came into view, and he saw the quaffle sail through the center of the farthest ring. From the other end of the pitch, Harry could hear Pansy's voice calling out, "Yeah, Harry. Nice throw, Potter." Flint had flown over and was hovering next to Harry. "Thanks," Harry said, breathing heavily. "So, you just proved that you can fly. You can catch. You can pass and shoot, not that you'll need to. What are you afraid of?" "Failure," said Harry quietly. "If I lose, I don't just lose for me. I lose for all of us. Draco, you, Slytherin, everybody." Flint snorted. "You're acting like a Hufflepuff. It's pathetic. Do you have emotions, Potter, or do your emotions have you?" Harry frowned, but said nothing. "Fear is functional," Flint said. "It's a survival instinct. It warns you when something might go bad. Don't let it control you." "Oh, so I should act like a big, brave Gryffindor," Harry said. Flint's brusque attitude was grating on Harry's already frayed nerves. "Gryffindors are stupid," Flint said. "They ignore fear. That's why they always end up in the hospital wing after Quidditch matches. You're a Slytherin, so start acting like it. Once fear has warned you of danger, it becomes useless. So figure out why you're afraid and get over it." "It's not that easy, Flint." Flint turned away from Harry and made a sweeping gesture with his arm. "This stadium will be full in less than 2 hours, Potter. Hundreds of people will watch this game, and most of them will want you to fail." Flint pointed to the Slytherin section, where Pansy was standing and waving. "But there are a few, Potter, who will want you to succeed. Those small, loyal few will stand behind you. And when you win, you will be rewarded." Flint turned back to Harry. "Your fear prevents you from seeing that. If you lose, yes, you lose for all of us. But if you win..." Harry's imagination took flight. He could see himself flying around the pitch, the entire Slytherin section cheering for him. He could see himself catching the snitch, in front of the outstretched hands of Katie Bell, the Gryffindor seeker. He could see the Slytherin fans screaming wildly, chanting Potter! Potter! As he flew around the pitch, snitch in hand. He could see himself walking into the common room, where the party was already underway, and Pansy would run across the room to congratulate him, and she would hug him before he was even through the door. Harry turned back to Flint, but Flint was gone. Harry looked across the pitch, and saw that the Slytherin captain had retrieved the quaffle and was walking toward the locker room. Harry took a last look around the pitch, then followed Flint. Harry was ready. Chapter 6. Once the Quidditch match was underway, it was clear that Gryffindor was outmatched. The Nimbus 2001 brooms gave Slytherin a distinct advantage. The Gryffindor chasers, Spinnet, Johnson and Ron Weasley, were still working on chemistry, and couldn't keep control of the quaffle for more than a few moments. Ron in particular seemed miscast, as his mindset was clearly defensive. He mishandled at least 2 open shots on the Slytherin rings. Fred and George Weasley, the beaters, were obviously skilled at striking bludgers, but their clean sweep fives limited their effectiveness. Gryffindor seeker, Katie Bell, was in her second year at the position, and was performing admirably. Last year had been a disaster, as Gryffindor finished dead last in the Quidditch Cup, but she had finally learned some of the subtleties of her position. What she lacked in raw talent, she was beginning to make up for in tactics. Harry and Bell had been shadowing each other for most of the game. Harry had a speed advantage, which Bell tried to negate by regularly bumping Harry's broom and moving into his flight path. Harry noticed that Bell was watching his eyes, using the direction of gaze to anticipate his movements. Harry was content to let Bell react to him. He knew that a Slytherin victory was inevitable unless Bell caught the snitch early. Every second that Bell spent focusing on Harry meant 1 second less for Bell to find the snitch. As the game progressed, the Slytherin chasers began to dominate. Slytherin scored early and often. The Slytherin beaters relentlessly harassed the Gryffindor chasers, causing turnover after turnover. Slytherin's lead was quickly becoming insurmountable. Potter, down. Harry reacted instantly to Flint's words, diving downward on his broom. A bludger, coming from behind, shot through the space he had just vacated. Harry turned to check on his beaters. Both were on the opposite side of the pitch, working in tandem to knock the other bludger into the Gryffindor chasers. The Weasley twins were in the same area of the pitch, desperately trying to defend their teammates. How did the Weasleys hit that bludger so far? Potter. Harry looked forward. The bludger was hurtling toward his face. He rolled in the air, allowing the bludger to pass above him while he was upside down. As Harry watched, the bludger turned itself in midair and once again began racing toward him. Harry put his broom at top speed and took off across the field. Belle hesitated, then followed Harry. She could have used the opportunity to look for the snitch, but chose to stick to her game plan, instead. Harry found himself dancing across the pitch, desperately dodging the rogue bludger. The bludger was faster than Harry's broom. No matter how fast Harry flew, the bludger was catching up. Thankfully, Harry's Nimbus 2001 was more maneuverable. As the bludger approached, Harry jerked his Nimbus to one side, and the bludger shot past him. But Harry's evasive maneuvers allowed Belle to begin closing the distance between them. Harry did everything he could to shake the bludger. He ran the bludger through the walls of the stadium, hoping it would become stuck, but the bludger smashed right through. Harry tried to run the bludger into the ground, but the bludger simply bounced up and resumed the chase. Harry tried twists and turns, spins and dives, but the bludger would not be shaken. Finally, as Harry turned a desperate loop to avoid a collision, he caught sight of the snitch. It was almost on the ground, but between Harry and the snitch was Katie Bell. Harry knew that he couldn't get to the snitch in a straight shot. Belle would go after the snitch while simultaneously coming into Harry's flight path. Harry wouldn't be able to maneuver around her before she made the catch. And all this was ignoring the fact that the rogue bludger was coming around for another pass, and Harry wouldn't be unable to outrace the bludger. But there had to be a way. Harry came out of the loop and reoriented himself on the pitch. The bludger was finishing its wide turn, coming around from Harry's right. Belle was below Harry, watching carefully. Harry waited, allowing the bludger to move closer. Harry looked left, gasped, and shot forward on his broom, putting the bludger directly behind him. The announcer, Lee Jordan, spoke over the loudspeaker. Potter may have seen the snitch. Belle moves to follow. As Harry had anticipated, Belle moved upward and into Harry's flight path. The rogue bludger, meanwhile, was closing the distance from behind. Harry pushed down on his broom, diving quickly, and the bludger shot through the space above him. Harry continued his dive, now aimed directly at the snitch. Above him, there was a satisfying thunk as the bludger made contact with Katie Bell. The crowd let out a great ooh. As Harry dove, he glanced backward to locate the bludger. Instead, he saw Katie Bell's limp body falling toward the ground. Harry looked around. Madam Hooch was across the pitch, caught between a loudly yelling Draco and a loudly yelling Ron Weasley. The bleachers were even farther away. At that distance, even Professor Dumbledore would have difficulty stopping Katie's fall. Harry pulled back on his broom, abandoning his dive for the snitch. He turned back and positioned himself to intercept Belle's fall. Harry caught the Gryffindor Seeker in midair, long before she was in danger of hitting the ground. Harry looked down, certain that the snitch would have vanished. Much to Harry's surprise, the snitch was still hovering near the grass. Harry glanced around, but couldn't locate the rogue bludger. With a shrug, Harry again dove toward the pitch, significantly slower, now, with the added weight on Katie Bell. When Harry reached ground level, the snitch zipped in a quick circle, but made no attempt to fly away. The snitch's behavior was odd, but Harry refused to look a gift horse in the mouth. Harry slowed until he was almost stationary, reached out, and plucked the snitch from the air with his hand. He turned to the stands and raised the snitch into the air. With a massive crash, the rogue bludger slammed into Harry's shoulder. There was a crack like a whip, and Harry felt a white-hot pain as the bones in his arm shattered. Harry was thrown from his broom, and Belle dropped to the ground. Several feet away, the rogue bludger slowed and dropped to the ground, as well, registering that the game had ended. Before he could enjoy the cheering of the crowd, Harry fainted. Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Asterisk. Nice catch, hero. It was the night, and Draco had snuck into the hospital wing. Katie Bell had already awakened and had been sent back to Gryffindor Tower. Madame Pomfrey was requiring Harry to spend the night, waiting as his arm bones regrow themselves, painfully, from nothingness. Much to Harry's dismay, Professor Lockhart had been the first on the scene at the Quidditch pitch, and his attempt to heal Harry's arm had instead removed Harry's bones entirely. Harry gave a small smile. I can't believe we won. The glow of Quidditch victory was the only thing that kept Harry's spirits up. Could you have hogged a little more glory? Draco said. You saved a girl, won the game, had a dramatic injury, am I missing anything? Come on, Draco. No, you should try harder, next time. Perhaps you could deliver a baby, kill a rampaging giant and raise the dead during the next game. If you're lucky, the school will forget that there were any other players on the pitch. I was attacked by a rogue bludger. I didn't try to do anything. Whatever. Good game. Draco glanced at the clock. There's a party on in the common room. I'll see you tomorrow morning. As Draco stood to leave, there was a crack in the air. Dobby, Draco's house elf, appeared at the foot of Harry's bed. Harry Potter must eat. Dobby saw Draco and gave a startled cry. With a crack, the elf disappeared. Draco was astonished. Was that Dobby? Get back here. The elf reappeared, eyes cast downward. Tell me what you're doing at Hogwarts, Draco demanded. Dobby hung his head. Dobby was trying to protect Harry Potter. From what? There's a plot, Dobby said, with great difficulty. Harry Potter will be safe if he is not at Hogwarts. Dobby thought his bludger. The house elf clasped both hands to his mouth. Your bludger? What did you do, Dobby? Draco demanded. The elf struggled, torn between keeping a secret and obeying his master. Tell me, now. Dobby's shoulders slumped. Dobby thought that Harry Potter would be sent home from school if Harry Potter was injured. Draco was flabbergasted. He turned to Harry. You weren't joking this summer, were you? Of course I wasn't, Harry said, a little crossly. Draco turned back to his elf. Dobby, were you at Harry's aunt's and uncle's house this summer? Dobby nodded again. His ears drooped and he turned his eyes down. What were you doing there? Draco demanded. Dobby's voice was small. Dobby was trying to make trouble for Harry Potter, so that Harry Potter would be forbidden from going to school. Harry was running out of adjectives to describe the various expressions of astonishment that were crossing Draco's face. The blond boy turned to Harry, as if searching for some insight. Harry shrugged with his good shoulder, and hoped that the gesture communicated a sufficient amount of I told you so. Dobby, I order you to stop trying to protect Harry Potter, Draco said. I order you to stop trying to remove Harry from Hogwarts. I order you to stop trying to prevent Harry from returning to Hogwarts if he leaves. Are my orders clear? Dobby nodded. Good. Now go home, and do not return. With a crack, Dobby disappeared. Wait. Harry called. But Dobby was gone. Call him back. Why? Because I want to know about the plot. Oh. Dobby. But the elf did not respond to Draco's call. Apparently, Dobby was strictly obeying Draco's order not to return. Stupid elf, Draco muttered. He'll follow orders to the letter, but only if it makes it inconvenient for us. What sort of plot is he on about? Harry mused. Before Draco could answer, he heard voices from the corridor. Draco dove under Harry's bed, and Harry pretended to be asleep. Through thin slits in his eyes, Harry was able to see that the voices belonged to Professors Dumbledore and McGonagall. Dumbledore was carrying the petrified body of a young Gryffindor boy, the annoying one, who was always carrying around a camera. Dumbledore's voice was low and grave as he spoke. Minerva, the Chamber of Secrets is open again. McGonagall was shocked. But, who? The question is not who, Dumbledore said, casting a glance at Harry's bed. The question is how. After the professors had left, Draco snuck out from under the bed. Draco admitted that Dumbledore's words made no more sense to him than they did to Harry. Exclamation point. Exclamation point. Asterisk. Draco's anger over the first Quidditch match had waned slightly. The latest petrification, combined with the bizarre behavior of Dobby, had made him forget, largely, that he was angry at Harry. The rest of the students at school, however, frequently found themselves to be the targets of Draco's misplaced anger. Any mention of the Quidditch match would cause Draco to begin ranting and raving, ostensibly about Gryffindors. At practice, Draco's furious play was more a result of rage and a desire to be the star of the next match, rather than a genuine desire to improve as a chaser. The entirety of Slytherin House was treading lightly around Draco. Even Pansy, who had recently been partnering with Draco in potions, was giving him more space than usual. Ironically, that left Harry and Draco as potions partners. Because Draco was so skilled at potions, he and Harry easily found themselves distracted, knowing that their potion would still be one of the best in class. In the second week of December, Harry and Draco were supposed to be making a swelling solution, but instead found themselves huddled over a piece of parchment covered in X's and O's. Draco pointed his wand, one of the X's moved across the parchment, followed by a long arrow. No, Harry, look here. Hufflepuff plays strong side offense, like this. They put both beaters on the left side of the field and stack all three chasers on the right, to attack two hoops. If we play our standard zone defense, they'll score any time they get the quaffle, because they'll always have an odd man rush. A throat cleared behind them. The boy slowly turned around. Professor Snape had silently crossed the room and was looming over their table. Gentlemen, I assume this is a diagram of the reacting agents of today's potions. Yes, Professor, said Harry. Good, said Professor Snape. Your enthusiasm is impressive. However, today your assignment is to produce a swelling solution, not a diagram. Perhaps you should refocus your efforts. Yes, sir, said Draco. Snape strode away. From the next table, Harry could hear Weasley complaining to Granger. I hate how Snape always favors Slytherins. Forget about it, Ron, said Granger. I mean, one of them has to be the heir, right? They're Slytherin's little princes. Sod off, Weasley, Harry snapped. Oh, did I hurt your delicate Slytherin feelings? Weasley's voice was lilting and mocking. I'm surprised you can feel any emotion at all, you cold-blooded snake. Harry and Draco both turned to Weasley, wands in their hands. Before they could do anything, there was a massive explosion behind them. Crabbe and Goyle began shouting, and Harry's left arm was splashed with their potion. Harry's body slowly began leaning to the left. He looked down and saw that his arm was swelling to massive size. Goyle ran into view, yelling, trying to cover his eyes, which had swollen to the size of dinner plates, with his hands. The students who hadn't been splattered with swelling solution were chattering excitedly. Snape strode through the classroom, waving his arms to clear the fumes from the explosion. Silence. The class immediately became quiet. Evanesco. With a flick of Snape's wand, the spilled solution disappeared. Harry saw that, in addition to himself and Goyle, at least half a dozen students were swelling in various places. Crabbe's tongue, for example, had grown so large that he was forced to carry it in his own hands. Students who have been splashed will come to the front of the classroom to receive a deflating draft. As Harry dragged his swollen arm to the front of the classroom, he saw Weasley standing alone and snickering at him. With great difficulty, Harry raised his enormous left middle finger at Weasley. After Harry and his classmates had taken the antidote, Snape investigated the cauldron explosion. Regardless of Crabbe and Goyle's ineptitude, nothing in the swelling solution should have been explosive, no matter what the combination or proportion. At the bottom of the cauldron, Snape discovered a burnt-out firework. "If I ever discover who did this," Snape said, "I will make sure they are expelled." Harry would generally have expected Weasley, his brothers would consider fireworks to be a perfect prank for potions. But Harry had been watching Weasley when the cauldron exploded. Granger seemed to be blushing a guilty shade of crimson, though. When potions had ended, Draco maneuvered until he was directly behind Ron Weasley. "Watch this," Draco whispered to Harry. Draco waved his wand and muttered quietly. A spider, one of several on a nearby window pane, floated into the air. Draco neatly tucked the spider inside Ron Weasley's collar. "This will teach him to be quiet," Draco said with a sneer. Several steps ahead, Weasley rolled his shoulders uncomfortably. The spider was tickling the back of his neck. Unaware that it was a spider causing the sensation, Weasley shook his head back and forth, as if trying to scratch and itch. Finally, Weasley reached back with his hand and rubbed his neck. As he did so, the spider delicately crawled onto Weasley's hand. Looking for the source of the tickle, Weasley brought his hand around, inadvertently placing the spider inches from his face. For a brief moment, the Gryffindor stared at the spider, and the spider at the Gryffindor. Then Weasley's courage broke, and he began running down the hallway. As he ran, he shrieked and slapped at his hand and his clothing. "They're all over me!" he screamed, over and over. Draco cackled with laughter. Harry had to admit, it was rather funny to see Weasley screaming like a girl. Harry didn't know how Draco had discovered Weasley's fear of spiders, but tormenting Weasley with them had become Draco's newest hobby. And, for some unknown reason, spiders seemed to be everywhere in the corridors of Hogwarts this December.